What if the miracles we witness are not just supernatural events, but also phenomena that science has yet to fully explain? The idea that science and miracles can coexist does not diminish the divine power of God but reveals a mysterious connection between the transcendent and the natural. This text invites us to reflect on how the ascension of Jesus, a central event in the Christian faith, could be understood in light of the laws of physics, without ever diminishing the divine mystery that surrounds it. From the beginning, the words of God laid the foundation for what we know as the universe. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. These words are not just a poetic introduction to the Bible but a profound understanding of the divine power that began to shape the cosmos. As science develops, we discover more about the laws that govern the universe: gravity, the movement of planets, the energy that keeps everything functioning. However, the question remains, where did these laws come from? Where did the intricate and perfectly organized plan that allows everything we know to exist originate? If we consider modern physics, we see that everything, from the formation of stars to the evolution of galaxies, follows very specific rules. Newton formulated the laws of gravity, Einstein brought us the theory of relativity, and more recently, quantum physics has revealed the mysteries of subatomic particle behavior. These laws are not accidental or random. They are evidence of a higher ordering. God, in His infinite wisdom, not only created the universe but also instituted natural laws to sustain it. Physics, like the other sciences, can be seen as an expression of divine intentions, a way of understanding the structure that God formed for the universe. In creation, God said, "Let there be light," and light appeared. Today, we know that light is a form of electromagnetic radiation, but this does not diminish the divine power behind this act. Science offers us an explanation of how light works, but the reason why it was created and how it aligns with the divine plan is beyond our understanding. It is not about diminishing God's power, but understanding that the natural laws are not just something we observe, they are part of God's grand design for the cosmos. The laws of physics may seem impersonal, but they are also a reflection of God. As we understand the universe, we begin to realize that everything has a purpose, from the movement of galaxies to the behavior of a simple drop of water. Physics is not just an academic discipline, it is a key that can bring us closer to the divine mind, allowing us to see the order and beauty that God embedded in His creation. This view reveals a fascinating paradox: science does not negate the need for God, it exalts it. Contrary to what many might think, physics does not rival divine work, it reveals how God sustains and organizes the world. Just as a work of art cannot exist without an artist, the universe cannot exist without a creator. The laws that govern the universe are the means through which God manifests Himself, and by studying these laws, we are discovering the wonders of divine power. Therefore, God's creation is not just an event that happened in the past, but it continues to unfold before our eyes. As science reveals more about the workings of the universe, we see the grandeur of God's plan being unveiled layer by layer. Every scientific discovery does not weaken faith but reinforces the idea that behind everything, there is the hand of a sovereign creator. The power of God is reflected in the order of natural laws, and science is a means of recognizing this divine order that permeates the entire cosmos. The Bible is filled with accounts of miracles that challenge human understanding and go beyond the limits of what we know as physical reality. From the parting of the Red Sea to the multiplication of the loaves and fishes, each miracle seems to be an act of direct divine power, a demonstration that God is beyond natural limitations. However, many scholars suggest that even these extraordinary events, while supernatural, can be interpreted in light of natural laws that we do not yet fully understand. Science, then, may not contradict the divinity behind the miracles, but provide a perspective that helps us understand how God could have acted within the rules of the universe. Let's look at one of the most well-known miracles in the Bible, the parting of the Red Sea. When Moses led the Israelites away from slavery in Egypt, Pharaoh's army pursued them to the shore of the sea. In that critical moment, God instructed Moses to stretch out his staff over the sea, and the waters parted, allowing the Israelites to pass through safely. The most common scientific explanation for this miracle is the possibility of a natural phenomenon known as a strong and constant wind, which could have caused a rapid division of the waters. Such an event has been observed in some situations when the wind pushes the waters away from the shore, revealing a shallow seabed. While this scientific explanation is interesting, we must not forget that even if such a phenomenon occurred, it was God who orchestrated it. The divine action is present in every detail, from the choice of the location to the exact moment when the wind began to blow with such force. What science can explain are the natural mechanisms behind the event, but it cannot explain the divine decision to make this happen at that specific moment, to save his people. Science can tell us how something happened, but faith teaches us why and who made it happen. Another classic example of a miracle that can be analyzed from a scientific perspective is the multiplication of the loaves and fishes. When Jesus fed a crowd of 5,000 people with only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, the event seems like a supernatural trick, a true miracle of abundance. Some scholars suggest that this miracle can be seen as a collective psychological phenomenon. The idea is that, seeing the act of sharing, the people in the crowd felt inspired to share their own provisions, resulting in the satisfaction of everyone's needs. While this offers a plausible explanation from a human standpoint, the divine action behind the miracle is clear. Jesus not only inspired sharing, but somehow physically multiplied the food to ensure that no one was left hungry. However, even when considering possible scientific explanations for these miracles, we cannot reduce God's power. The act of Jesus multiplying the food or parting the sea cannot be fully understood by human logic or scientific explanations alone. Divine intervention goes beyond natural explanations. Science can help us understand certain aspects of how the world works, but the why of these miracles remains a deep mystery that can only be attributed to God's sovereign will. Miracles like these are not just extraordinary events, but a way through which God communicates with us, showing His power, His mercy, and His ability to act in ways beyond human understanding. They are not meant to be fully explained by scientific methods, but to teach us about the nature of God, His authority over natural laws and His ability to transcend those laws when necessary. Therefore, while we may seek scientific explanations for miraculous events, the true essence of the miracles lies in their divine origin. God uses natural laws to manifest Himself in ways that defy human logic. Science can give clues about how things happen, but the centrality of God in the miracles is what must remain clear. He is the author of all events and, at the same time, the one who governs all natural laws, using them as tools to express His love, power, and purpose. Even with scientific explanations, God's divine power remains the true foundation of all miracles. Since the beginning of time, natural laws have governed the universe with precision and harmony. Gravity keeps the planets in orbit, light propagates according to specific laws, and chemical reactions follow patterns that can be predicted and repeated. For many, this regularity is evidence of an impersonal universe. However, for those who believe, these laws are manifestations of God's very character, perfect, constant, and powerful. Every mathematical equation that describes a natural phenomenon is like a divine signature, a silent reminder that behind the visible order, there is a sovereign creator. When we look at science from this perspective, we realize that it is not a threat to faith, but a window to admire even more the greatness of God. For example, the law of gravity, discovered by Isaac Newton, is so precise that it allows us to calculate the trajectory of satellites with impressive accuracy. This same precision leads us to reflect. How could such an intricately organized universe have arisen without an intelligent mind behind it? Science, in its relentless quest for answers, often ends up revealing more questions that point to the existence of something, or someone, infinitely greater than our understanding can reach. The Bible describes God as a God of order and not confusion, 1 Corinthians 14 verse 33, and this order is visible in all areas of science. From the complexity of the human genetic code to the delicate balance of ecosystems, creation reflects an incomprehensible intelligence. Modern science, far from diminishing divine greatness, should inspire even more admiration and reverence. When a scientist discovers a new particle or a new force of nature, they are ultimately unveiling yet another layer of the veil that separates creation from the Creator. It is important to understand that, in exploring natural laws, science is merely touching the surface of the vastness of God's knowledge. Just as a painter leaves traces of their personality in their works, God has left his mark on every aspect of the universe. The laws of physics, biology, and chemistry are merely expressions of his ongoing will to keep creation functioning in an orderly manner. When Jesus performed miracles, he did not necessarily violate the natural laws, but demonstrated absolute mastery over them, like an author of a book who is able to alter the story without contradicting the essence of the plot. Science, therefore, does not diminish the power of miracles, nor reduce them to merely natural phenomena. On the contrary, the existence of such intricate and constant natural laws is an additional proof that there is an attentive, intentional, and sovereign Creator. When we study the wonders of the universe, we should not drift away from God but draw closer to Him, in awe of His wisdom and power. Science explains the how of things, faith reveals the why. And together, science and faith, far from opposing one another, can walk side by side, pointing to a God who reigns not only over the supernatural but also over the natural, with unquestionable majesty. Since the beginning of humanity, man has marveled at events that escape his understanding. Phenomena that challenge the known laws of nature have, in many cultures and eras, been called miracles. In the Christian tradition, the Bible is filled with these accounts, moments when divine intervention suspends, shapes, or transcends the natural order to manifest the glory of God. But does every miracle necessarily need to violate the laws of physics, chemistry, or biology? Or could it be that God Himself, as the creator of natural laws, works through them in ways so extraordinary that we can only comprehend them as miracles? A fascinating example to reflect upon is the crossing of the Red Sea, recorded in the book of Exodus. According to the account, Moses, obeying God's command, stretched his hand over the sea, and the waters divided, forming walls of water on the right and left, allowing the people of Israel to cross on dry land. This event, in itself, transcends any common natural explanation. However, researchers have investigated possible natural conditions that could, hypothetically, result in similar phenomena. Some scientists have proposed that strong winds, known as receding winds, could have pushed the water away from certain shallow areas, creating a temporary dry passage. Others suggest that seismic activity could have caused abrupt movements in tectonic plates, quickly altering the sea bed and creating an opening. As interesting as these theories are, they only scratch the surface of the true mystery. It is not just the physical occurrence that impresses, it is the precise timing and circumstances of the event. The Red Sea did not open days before or after, it opened exactly at the moment the people needed to cross, and it closed right after, destroying the Egyptian army. What probability would there be for winds and tectonic plates to perfectly synchronize their forces at such a crucial moment? The statistical improbability alone is a signature of the miracle. God not only used natural elements, He directed them with absolute sovereignty, at the right time, for the right purpose. This understanding broadens our view of what a miracle is. A miracle is not just something that goes against the laws of nature, but something that reveals God's purpose and active presence in the world. Often, God chooses to act silently through the very mechanisms He created, showing that His sovereignty is not limited by creation or its laws. Just as an author can change their novel at any time without contradicting the story, God manipulates natural circumstances without breaking His own rules. Other biblical episodes reinforce this idea. Let us think of the star that guided the Magi from the east to the birth of Jesus. Some astronomers suggest that a rare planetary conjunction could have produced an unusual light in the sky, visible for weeks. However, the question remains. How could this star move in such a way as to guide specific travelers over great distances and stop precisely over the place of the birth? Science may suggest astronomical phenomena, but the supernatural direction of the event remains undeniable. The star was more than a celestial body, it was a divine instrument. Another example is the resurrection of Jesus. Scientifically, there is no plausible explanation for how a human body dead from crucifixion, a brutal and effective method of execution, could return to life after 3 days. There is no natural law that explains the reversal of decomposition, the restoration of organs, and the full recovery of physical vitality. In this case, the miracle presents itself even more clearly, a direct action of God that completely transcends the limitations of human biology. These examples lead us to a deep reflection. God, in His infinite wisdom, chooses when to act through creation and when to transcend it. Science can explain aspects of the how, but it can never touch the why and the for what of miracles. Even if we can find natural patterns in certain miraculous events, the essence of the miracle is not in the mechanics of the occurrence but in the divine intention that directs it and the spiritual transformation it brings about. Therefore, in the face of every extraordinary natural phenomenon or every miracle described in Scripture, we should ask ourselves, are we merely witnessing impersonal forces at work, or are we contemplating the intentional movement of the living God in the world? Science and faith do not need to be in conflict. On the contrary, together they reveal the greatness of a God who governs all things, the visible and the invisible, with absolute perfection. Thus, recognizing that natural phenomena can serve divine purposes does not diminish faith. On the contrary, it enhances the understanding that God is closer, more active, and more sovereign than we could ever imagine. And even if our eyes seek scientific explanations, our hearts should always remember, in every wind, in every star, in every parted sea, God's hand is there, guiding the history of humanity with unfathomable love and power. The New Testament is a vibrant testimony to God's action in the human world through Jesus Christ. In it, we find events that challenge not only human reasoning but also the limitations of the natural laws as we know them. Interestingly, when we examine these miracles through the lens of modern science, we realize something even more remarkable. Far from undermining faith, science can, in fact, further highlight the complexity, beauty, and intention behind divine acts. Take, for example, the transformation of water into wine at the wedding at Cana, as described in the Gospel of John. Scientifically, we know that the chemical composition of water is H2O, while wine contains, in addition to water, sugars, ethanol, acids, aromatic compounds, and a variety of complex organic elements. For the water to instantly become wine, a drastic reordering of the water's molecular structure would be required, incorporating elements that were simply not present. It would be like performing a complex chemical synthesis in the blink of an eye, something completely beyond human capacity, even with modern technology. Some might argue that the alchemy of transformation is impossible under the known laws of chemistry. And indeed, it is, from a human perspective. But the miracle at Cana points to something greater, Jesus' authority over the very matter, over the basic structures of creation. In this case, science does not serve to disprove the miracle, but to emphasize how supernatural it is. The chemical complexity involved is a reminder of the magnitude of divine power, not a denial of it. Another notable episode is the multiplication of the loaves and fishes to feed a crowd of thousands. Biologically, duplicating organic molecules like proteins, carbohydrates, and nucleic acids would require not only additional raw materials but also energy and highly sophisticated biochemical processes. Science knows that the spontaneous multiplication of matter does not occur without a source of energy and a controlling agent. And here we see something essential: Jesus, the author of life itself, commands, and matter obeys. Once again, science does not debunk the narrative, it highlights its human impossibility, emphasizing the need for divine intervention. The healings performed by Jesus also offer a rich field of reflection. Modern medicine documents cases of extraordinary recovery, known as spontaneous remissions, but even these natural phenomena are slow, partial, and in many cases, inexplicable. In contrast, Jesus heals the blind from birth, paralytics, and lepers, diseases for which even today, treatments are long and complex. Instant healing not only defies the natural processes of cellular regeneration but redefines the limits of human biology. Once again, science helps us appreciate the size of the miracle, for by understanding the limitations of the human body, we grasp even better how supernatural these healings were. And the greatest of all miracles, the resurrection of Jesus, remains beyond any plausible scientific explanation. Biology asserts that death is an irreversible process, cells decompose, organs collapse, and life ceases permanently. No human technology has been able to reverse this process completely. Yet, the New Testament witnesses that Jesus not only resurrected, but did so with a glorified body, able to transcend physical barriers, such as closed doors, while still retaining recognizable characteristics. Here, science falls silent before the mystery. And it is in this silence that faith finds its most sacred space. It is crucial to realize that science and faith do not need to be adversaries. On the contrary, when science reaches its limits, it invites us to look beyond. To consider that there is a reality greater than that which we can measure or quantify. As Johannes Kepler, the great Christian astronomer, said, "Science is simply thinking God's thoughts after him." Science discovers the laws, faith reveals the lawgiver. What we see in the miracles of the New Testament is precisely this harmony, God acting sovereignly, sometimes within the laws he himself created, sometimes beyond them, but always in accordance with his divine purpose. Science can explain how things work under normal conditions, but the miracle is the sign that behind all normality, there is a God who is free to act as he wills, when he wills, and in the manner that best reveals his glory and love. Therefore, science and faith are not forces that cancel each other out. They are, in fact, two lenses through which we can contemplate the grandeur of God, science showing us the wonder of his creation and faith leading us to recognize his unlimited power to operate beyond it. When we look at miracles through these two lenses, we realize that God is not in opposition to reason, he is the source of all reason and, at the same time, the mystery that transcends all human understanding. Since the human being began to observe the starry sky and uncover the secrets of matter, the hope was born that one day we could understand everything, the workings of the universe, the mystery of life, and even events considered miraculous. Modern science has advanced immensely, revealing everything from the intimate structure of atoms to the distant limits of galaxies. However, even in the face of so many advances, one truth remains unquestionable: science is, and always will be, limited by human nature itself. Human beings are finite. Our senses are limited, our observation instruments are imperfect, and even our most sophisticated theories are attempts, approximations, and incomplete descriptions of a reality that surpasses our full capacity for understanding. Science operates within what can be measured, tested, and reproduced, but God dwells in the realm of the eternal, the infinite, the supernatural. Therefore, no matter how much we progress, there will always be an insurmountable distance between the Creator and the creation. This limitation becomes even more evident when we try to apply scientific concepts to explain miraculous events. We can theorize about how a body could ascend to the heavens, as in the case of Jesus' ascension. We might imagine manipulations of space-time, alterations in gravitational laws, or phenomena still unknown to current physics. But, in the end, any scientific explanation will be nothing more than a pale shadow of the true event. Science can suggest how something could happen, but it can never capture the why, the divine intention, the mystery of God's love acting on behalf of humanity. The Apostle Paul, in his letter to the Romans, already affirmed that the invisible attributes of God, his eternal power and his divine nature, are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, Romans 1 verse 20. Science can lead us to contemplate these attributes, but it can never capture them in formulas or equations. God is not an object of study, he is the supreme subject, who reveals himself to whom he wills, in his sovereign will. Moreover, there is the question of mystery, a fundamental dimension of faith. Mystery is not ignorance, it is the humble acceptance that there are realities that surpass any human system of explanation. When we try to reduce God to something fully explainable, we risk creating a small God, made in the image of our own limited minds. But the true God is infinite, holy, and incomprehensible in his entirety. In his book Science and Religion, physicist John Polkinghorne, who was also an Anglican priest, stated, "Science tells us how the heavens go, faith tells us who made the heavens and why." In other words, science is a wonderful tool for uncovering the mechanisms of the universe, but it cannot replace the personal relationship with the God who is beyond the mechanisms. God does not submit to laboratory tests or human theories. He is free to act above, beyond, and through the laws he himself established. When he performs a miracle, he is not violating natural laws, but manifesting his creative power in a way that transcends our understanding. And it is precisely here that the beauty lies. The God who created such perfect laws to govern the universe is the same God who can, out of love, intervene sovereignly in our history. Therefore, recognizing the limitations of science is not to despise it. On the contrary, it is to place it in its rightful place, as a gift from God to humanity, but not as the ultimate source of truth. Science illuminates the way, but it is faith that reveals the final destination. In the end, we are all called to a choice. To trust only in what we can measure and prove, or to open our hearts to the one who created us, loves us, and acts on our behalf in ways our minds can never fully comprehend. Science walks with reason, faith flies with the Spirit. Together, they do not contradict each other, but point, in different ways, to the unfathomable mystery of God's presence among us. And perhaps that is the greatest of miracles, that the God who transcends time and space still cares to reveal himself, in small signs, to humble hearts that know that, before the divine greatness, all human knowledge is only the beginning of a glimpse into eternity. Even though science seeks to explain miracles, God remains beyond all understanding. Perhaps the mysteries we try to decipher are merely whispers of something infinitely greater. In the end, science reveals the created order, but it is faith that connects us to the Creator. True greatness lies in accepting that God transcends all human understanding.